So welcome and thank you for joining me. I'd like you to picture your favorite presenter. So depending on your age or your generation, possibly that might have been a newsreader, or it could be someone who ran a YouTube channel or still does, or it could be a TikToker these days. I want to picture them in the way that they can connect to you. You feel like they're talking directly to you. You're fascinated and engaged by what they're saying. You trust them and you listen to them. Now I want you to, as you picture them, turn around and look behind them and realize that they're sitting in front of a piece of glass, whether that's a TV camera or a webcam or an iPhone. They're really just speaking to a piece of glass, but somehow they're able to reach through that glass and connect with us and make it feel like they're talking directly to us. They're in the same room. Well, how do they do that? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about ways you can be more connected when you are communicating online or on the phone with people in another room, in another place. So let's get into the content then. As a kid, I was one of those people that I'm sure annoyed their parents and teachers and always wanted to know why. And in fact, to be honest, it's probably even now as an adult, whenever I join webinars or I go to training, I want to know the reason why. It's not enough for me to know how to do something. I want to know why I'm doing it that way. And only 2 days ago, I was reading a list of mythbusters from the World Health Organization website about the coronavirus. And one of them said, you can't kill the virus by running hot air over your hands. And I wanted to know why. And it's not only important for knowing the reasons behind that particular fact, but if you know those reasons, you can apply them in different circumstances. So if I knew what it is that kills the virus, then I might be able to apply that to other things, like the temperature of water or use of soap and alcohol. Similarly, what we're going to talk about first is how we communicate as human beings and how these principles then affect the way that we connect in online meetings. These principles are general principles regardless of the way that you're communicating. So they apply in all circumstances and you'll be able to use those in all of your communication. But we'll then move on to specifically applying them to online meetings. So what I'm going to give you is 3 plus 7. So I'll start off with 3 principles of human connection, and then we'll apply that and give you 7 tips to use those principles in your online meetings so you can be more connected. So let's start with the 3 principles of human connection. The first one is that communication is a full body exercise. It's not just the words that we use that communicate meaning. It's our facial expressions, the tone of our voice, and our body language. All of these things collectively convey our message to other people. What this means is if you can't see or hear the other person you're talking to and listening to, then you are not going to get the full communication, the full message. There is more likelihood of misunderstanding. There is more likelihood of missing out on part of the message. And there is more likelihood of being confused with what people are saying to you or what they're responding to you. So communication is a full body exercise. The second principle is that trust is in the eyes of the beholder. We place a lot of importance with where people's eyes are. And when people look at us, we feel connected to them. We feel that we can trust them. We are more likely to believe the words they say when they are holding eye contact with us. This is an innate trait. And when we were very, very small, so when we're babies, even before we're old enough to reach out and grab something, we have a very, very fine sense of where someone's eyes are looking. We think that this is biologically from primitive times because where someone's eyes go was often the first indication of a threat, a saber-toothed tiger, or maybe it was an antelope that we were trying to catch for dinner. So we're very tuned to where people's eyes are looking. What this means is that if someone's eyes are not looking at us, so you're familiar with the concept of shifty eyes. So if someone's eyes are moving around, we start to distrust them, and we're also distracted. We want to know where their eyes are looking. So trust is in the eyes of the beholder. The third principle of effective communication is it tain't what you say, it's the way you say it when it comes to emotion. You might be familiar with the statistic that's often used incorrectly about 7% of meaning in communication is the words and the other 93% is body language and tone. Well, this is true when it comes to emotion. Not all meaning, but when it comes to content that has emotional sense, then we put a lot more importance on body language and tone of voice. We used to think body language was more important, but more recent research indicates that it's the tone of our voice which we listen to first. Rather than the words we use, we place more importance on tone when it comes to emotion. And you know this, if you were to ask me, how did it go? And I said, great. You would know that that's a completely different answer to if you asked me, how did it go? And I said, great. You can tell from my facial expressions and the tone of my voice that they're two entirely different answers. And it's for this reason that we have emojis, because texts are very, very poor at conveying intention and meaning and emotion when it comes to emotional things. So when it comes to emotion, tain't what you say, it's the way that you say it. So in summary, those three principles are that communication is a full body exercise, trust is in the eyes of the beholder, and when it comes to emotional content, tain't what you say, it's the way that you say it. So let's now apply those principles to online meetings. 7 tips for being more connected in online meetings. Tip number 1, whenever possible, turn the video on. As we know now, communication uses all of our body, our face, our tone of voice. If people can't see us, they're less likely to understand what it is we're saying. They're also less likely to be engaged, less likely to feel connected and interested in what we're saying. And they're less likely to trust us because they can't see that we believe what we're saying. So wherever you can, turn that video on. I know for some of us it might feel uncomfortable, it might feel awkward, but you need to get over that discomfort. Another factor with it is that it helps you stay connected yourself and less distracted. When you have the video off, you're more likely to be tempted to scroll through social media on your phone or do some other work. If the camera's on, you know that people can see if you're paying attention to the meeting, and you will be less likely to be distracted and more engaged in the meeting. So wherever you can, my number 1 tip is make sure the video is on. The second tip is to stand up if you can. If you can't stand up, sit up straight with your chin up. You might be able to stand up if you've got a standing desk, if you're lucky enough to have a standing desk at home and you can lift it up. Or you could do what I've done here and put my screen and webcam on a box. That might allow you to stand up. But at the very least, have your back straight when you're sitting and your chin up. This makes you feel more confident when you are speaking, makes you feel more grounded and powerful. It also allows you to breathe deep down into your diaphragm and bring that full breath to your voice, which makes you sound richer and more engaging when you speak. It also helps you stay more engaged and interested. The worst thing you can do is slump over your laptop sitting at the dinner table while trying to stay engaged in a meeting. Third tip is to have the camera level with your eyes and show your whole face and as much of your chest as you can. This is the way we naturally have conversations with other people. we want to be able to see them eye to eye. So you want the camera to be level with our eyes. And we want to be able to see at least your entire face to get those facial expressions, but as much of your body as you can, because then people can see a little bit of your body language. And they might be able to see your hands as well, your hand gestures that you naturally use to emphasize the points that you're making. I can show you an example of what is one of the typical ways that we show ourselves when we are sharing our screen or on a video conference, is that we put our laptop on the dinner table, we tilt the screen back so we can see it, not so the camera is in the right position, and then we look down at our screen like this, and we get this odd feeling of someone looking down on us. Do you ever have meetings at work or conversations where you're in this position? I can only think of possibly going to the gym when you're doing sit-ups and your physical trainer, your personal trainer is above you and you might be looking up at them. But otherwise, this is a very unnatural way to be having a conversation with someone. We're also looking up their nose. It feels really awkward. So if you can avoid this, do it at all costs so that people feel more natural when you're speaking and they'll feel more engaged with you. So take your laptop, put it on a stack of books or on a box on your table, and that way you'll be able to have the camera closer to eye level. It'll be much more natural position when you have the screen facing you, and you'll look more like you're in the same room as other people and having that conversation. So now we've talked about those 3 points. I would like you, if you haven't already, just to do a little bit of an exercise and see how you've set up. Now, I'm not going to be able to turn the video on for you, and I'm not expecting you to be on video. But if the video was on now, what would people see? Are you standing or sitting up straight? Is the camera level with your eyes? Would your whole face be in the view of the camera? Be conscious of these things in your meetings in the future and when you're setting up for a meeting so that you can be more connected and more engaged. 4th point I'd like to move to is lighting. If you can, have natural lighting and make sure whatever lighting you have is in front of you. It's behind your screen, shining on your face. If you can't get natural lighting, then use a lamp, possibly a floor lamp or a desk lamp, similarly put behind and above, if you can, your screen. But the ideal is to be facing a window with natural light on your face, or have a window to one side of you with a well-lit room. That natural lighting will give the most light to your face so that people can see you and they can see your facial expressions. A common mistake that we might see is people sitting with a window behind them. In this case, their face just becomes a black blob. We can't see their facial expressions. We may not even be able to tell they're talking because we can't see their lips move. And sometimes you might see the camera in the webcam do that in, out thing as it tries to adjust the aperture, and it doesn't know whether to have the right lighting for your face or the right lighting for the bright scene behind you. And that just makes it very distracting and very hard for people to pay attention to the way you look and the words you are saying. So wherever possible, have natural lighting and always have that lighting in front of you, behind your screen. The 5th point is to look straight at the camera when you are talking. This is the way that we do that eye contact and we act like that presenter that we were thinking about at the beginning. We're looking through the piece of glass and connecting with the people on the other side. We want to be looking at the camera to maintain that eye contact so that people know that we're engaged and we appear more trustworthy. When you're not speaking, feel free to look around the screen at the faces of the other people in the meeting who are talking. That way you'll get the full, as much as you can, you get their full message. But then when it's your turn to speak, look back and talk straight down the camera. Another common error that we see is when people have an iPad or an iPhone and they dial into the meeting, they put it into landscape, and the camera's on one side, and they'll be looking at the screen at everybody else in the meeting away from the camera. And you have this effect where your eyes are looking to one side and you're slightly off to the one side of the center of the screen. Because you're not maintaining eye contact, people are less likely to pay attention to you, and they're also going to slightly distrust you. Also, they're going to be distracted because whether they're conscious of it or not, they'll want to know what it is you're looking at, which is off to the side of the screen. So to stop that distraction, to appear as trustworthy as possible and to be connected, bring your eyes back to the camera. And you might need to find that on your iPhone or your iPad, but it is at the top of the screen in portrait, and it'll be on one side or the other when you are in landscape. So when you are speaking, look straight at the camera. My sixth tip for being connected in online meetings is to show your emotions. I spent 20 years in the Air Force as an officer, and we were taught to be stoic and calm and confident. When I left the Air Force, I had to teach myself to show my emotions, to allow my emotions to be seen by other people when I was talking to them. Because I talked to a wider range of people than I did when I was in the Air Force, in a diverse range of situations. So I needed to learn again how to show my emotions. Similarly, when we are alone at home, working in our home office, surrounded by technology, not surrounded by people as we normally would have been in the office environment, it's easy to feel disconnected. We dial into a meeting, we talk about the facts and figures, and then we get out of that meeting. And it's easy to have no emotional feeling, no emotional content in that. Sometimes you need to be conscious of this and allow your emotion to be slightly amplified when you're talking online. Smile, use hand gestures, make sure that people can hear your emotional response to things that are being said. You're excited about somebody's idea, or you're disappointed that you weren't as productive this morning as you wanted to be, or you're concerned about the future of the company. Amplify these emotions so that people get a fuller sense of the communication that you are trying to convey through this cold technological medium. The seventh and final tip that I have for you is to be human. Allow people to see the human side of you. We don't have those chances that you do in the work environment to bump into someone in the kitchenette or to go for coffee together and have those human discussions. So show something that's personal to you. Ask someone about the thing that's in the background of their screen. Show that human side, that connection that we would not naturally have in the work environment. Do that online as well. Don't just focus on the agenda, strictly facts and figures. Allow for a little bit of that human side to be seen. So, summary of those 7 tips that I've given you. Based on those 3 principles of human connection, the tips are to, wherever possible, use video. Stand up if you can. If you can't, sit tall and straight. Show your whole face and as much of your torso as you can, and have the camera at eye level. Have natural lighting in front of you. Talk to the camera when you are speaking. Show your emotions through the camera and be human ultimately, so that you can stay connected as a human being with the other people that you're working with and the other people who are on the meeting. So they're the 7 tips I have for you. I'm going to now go and see if there's any questions that you might have or comments. And please, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A area. And I'll also have a look at the chat as well to see if there are any comments there to work on. Okay, so I've got a question here from Paul. He's asking me about, for the people who use their hands a lot, how can they bring their energy into the discussion when they seem to be trapped by a small screen. I would just encourage you to be as natural as possible. One thing you can do is to be at least arm's length from your screen. I'm a little bit further than arm's length here. That gives you a little bit more room to move about, rather than leaning over your laptop screen, which will have you confined and these little fingers just every now poking in, or maybe seeing this movement but no hands visible. So if you can get yourself a little bit back from the screen, but ultimately just be as natural as you can, maybe a little bit amplified, and don't worry about whether that appears weird. People will be able to see your body move and they'll interpret it as the gesticulation that you normally do. Another question Paul asked is, how can we avoid humor being misinterpreted in an online environment? Well, humor is always very contextual, and it can be something that we need to be careful about because we need to think about the ways people might interpret it. But you want to have the same thing that you would do in a face-to-face environment. So before you use humor, think about the people you're talking to, know who is in the room, and think about the way that they communicate and the way that they would connect with you. Then you also want to, during your conversation, give opportunities for people to respond and pay attention to the way that they respond to the things you're saying and the way you're saying it. So you do these things when you're face-to-face. Apply the same principles when you're online, but you might just have to be a little bit more conscious of it. Start the meeting already thinking of the people and thinking out towards them of who's in the room, the virtual room, and then pay attention, give them opportunities to speak and respond as you speak to make sure they haven't misinterpreted you. And that applies not just for humor, but for anything you say. Thanks, Paul. That's 2 excellent questions. Chris has asked any tips for bringing meeting delegates into the conversation. So leading a meeting, as he says, can sometimes feel like an echo chamber, because if you're in a physical meeting room, people would be nodding or agreeing with you. Well, let's talk briefly just about telephone conversations, because we haven't touched on it specifically, but some of these principles apply as well in telephone conversations. So standing up, being tall and straight will help your voice sound clearer and more direct. And this circumstance that Chris talks about, where you might not get any response, is possibly more likely on a telephone because you can't see people nodding with you or giving the thumbs up, which they might do on a video call. The technique I use is to frequently stop and then ask people by name to contribute. This works with maybe 8 to 10 people. If you get more, then it does get a little bit awkward. So you might select different people each time you stop. But by the end of the meeting, you do want to specifically call for someone and ask for their input. This does a couple of things. It makes sure that you get people engaged and get their responses to you. And some of the people in your meetings will be the ones who always respond and always talk. But if you ask people by name, then you'll get the people who might be quieter or take a little bit longer to think about what they're saying, or a little bit less sure of themselves. You'll get them to participate in the meeting as well. So I would not just say any questions, because you may not get anything, or you may get people talking over each other. So Chris, I'd encourage you to name people specifically in the meeting to make sure you've got everybody's input. Mick has asked about tools. So he's asked about what particular features of the online platforms like Zoom, which is what I'm using now, would I recommend using to engage the audience. So some of the features that you can use, they differ between webinars and meetings. Webinars allow you to run polls, although apparently not everybody can see polls. I had a second poll ready, but I'll make sure I fix that next time and work out why not everybody could see the poll. But you can use polls. You can use the chat box and the Q&A boxes to ask people to add their inputs. You can do that technique I asked for, I mentioned previously in the answer to Chris. You could ask people by name to chat, respond in the chat box to stay engaged. You can use other techniques in a presentation that you might use face-to-face. So say things like imagine, or do an exercise, stand up. And you can ask people to do these things even though you can't see them or they're not in the same room as you. If you're on a Zoom meeting, then that gives you other features like being able to put people into breakout rooms so they can talk amongst themselves and they can discuss a topic that you might have raised and how it applies to their particular circumstances. So there's some of the other tools that you can use to keep engagement in your online meetings or online training sessions. So thanks, Mick. That was an excellent question. So you may not be able to see the questions, but I will make sure that you know the answers as we get through to the end. Just wait to see if anybody else has any questions. Oh, so I actually got an interesting input on the answer to that question from Yumiko. She said that, well, actually, it's also the part of being human, but she said one of the students had their pets appear on screen at the beginning of a tutorial while they're waiting for everybody to come online. So that was a really easy way to ease into that tutorial, I imagine, and also generate a bit of human nature discussion and connection before you get to the facts. So that's a great idea. And that's a really good example of someone thinking of a way to generate a bit of discussion, show a bit of humanity, and show something that you can all connect with online. Okay, so that's the questions that I've got. If you do have any other questions, then please feel free to send them to me afterwards. This webinar is one that I've been doing recently for obvious reasons, but some of the other webinars that I have been developing and delivering to other clients include leading online meetings so that you can be confident and clear and connected. Also communicating through uncertainty from a position of strength, which is obviously of great interest to leaders right now. And a third webinar that I have been working on right now has been providing feedback to other people. And because of these circumstances, I've added to that how you provide feedback using online tools as well as face-to-face feedback, which is where that started. So if any of those webinars are of interest to you or your workplace, then please let me know. And I'm very happy to talk to you about it. But you personally, if you have any questions or if you'd just like to connect with me or you have some feedback for me, then please reach out at these contact details. I'm on LinkedIn with my name. And if you send me a connection request, I will accept it. Also, if you have a personal question about online meetings that you haven't put up in the questions that we've talked about here, if you do have a question, then please reach out to me. I'm very happy to have a 10-15-minute phone conversation with anybody who has a question. So please let me know. We can organize a time to do that. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you're staying safe and healthy. I hope that your work environment is going well. And I hope that some of these points were useful for you. Please let me know if you need anything else. But right for now, I'm going to say goodbye and let you go back off to your work or your home environment. And I wish you all the best for the day and for whatever the coming weeks hold. Thank you very much for participating and being part of this.